Okay, now that we have the floor built, we're going to come in here and do some surfacing. Now, there's lots of different ways to surface this. So maybe we'll do it a couple of different ways. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up our material editor in here. And let's go ahead and let's use an Arch and Design on here. I'm going to use an Arch and Design because that's a physically accurate shader. We'll just name this Wooden Hut Floor. Okay, and of course I want to name my object out here too. We'll call it the same thing, Wooden Hut Floor. And then apply this to it. Okay, so then we can start constructing our piece. Now, in this particular one, I'm going to start off with a default material. So we can go over here to Mental Ray and come down here into our default library, and we've got flooring in here. Let's go down to wood, and so we can pick a piece of wood to start with in here. So we'll just go maybe with this beech wood. I'll bring this out in here. Now, I'm really not going to use this shader. The only reason I'm using this is because it's already set me up with this particular wooden pattern. Okay, so what I'm really going to do is just grab that and drag it so I have that. And then it's going to delete this because I want to use my Arch and Design. And so I'm going to put this in the diffuse. Now, what a lot of people do is they'll actually do it this way. They'll actually do that, and then they'll just unplug this, you know, get rid of that, and they'll plug this in. I don't really do that. I mean, you can, but then this gives you an extra node, because what's really happening is you got this plugged into that, and then this has got all kinds of, tiling features and stuff in it, and I don't want to use this tiling features. It's just extra nodes, so I get that out of there. And so what I'm using is this particular piece here, and we can actually click on our view, and there is the wood that I'm going to use to put on it. So we'll just drop that into our diffuse slot. Now, if we go ahead and double click on this so that we can turn on See in Viewport, which is this button right here, you're going to see we can't see it in here. And if I render, it's not going to render. That's because it's missing the mapping coordinates, because splines don't have mapping coordinates. Okay, so we're going to have to put a mapping coordinate on here. Now, you can go in here and do a UV unwrap, and it seems like everybody thinks that's the goal in life, is to be able to unwrap something. I can texture this entire piece and never even think about unwrapping it. Unwrapping is just a pain in the butt. Yes, I need to know how to unwrap, and yes, sometimes that's the way to go, but I can texture this entire thing and never touch a UV unwrap. So the first thing I'm going to do is come in here and I'm going to add a UV W map modifier to it. And you'll see that it'll default snapping to the actual piece. Okay, like so. Now that's way too big, and what I'm going to want it also is that's going to give me stretching on the sides, and so I'm going to want this to be a box. Okay, and I'm going to want it to be a cube so that it's making that the same size. Now, I happen to know, because when we're looking at that material, that bitmap is square. Okay, a lot of times the bitmaps aren't square. And since it's square, then it doesn't really matter. As long as this is square, then it's not stretching it in any way. Okay, and now if I want it to be smaller, all I have to do is come in here and get the gizmo. And let's turn off our wireframe where we can kind of see it. And now I can just scale the gizmo down. I'm hitting my space bar, which is the lock key down here. So I just click on my viewport, and I can scale this down to get this to whatever size I think is appropriate. Now you can see one of the problems is I really want this wood to run the lengthways with these, and we're just running across generic the whole thing. So that's a problem. Okay, so I'm going to prep this before I do it. Okay, so let's just copy that and delete it off here for right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to pick this piece here, and I'm going to detach that, because really that's not wood. That's going to be some kind of concrete or something like that. And so this is the hut center, maybe concrete. Okay, so we'll make that separate. And now what I'm going to want to do on these is I'm actually going to come in here and select at faces, and I'm going to select all these and delete them. And I'm going to select those. I'm going to delete these, and all I'm going to do is keep one section of this. Okay. So now I can paste my gizmo back on it, and then I can move it. And now what I can do is to rotate that so that it's running lengthways with the piece, okay? So now that wood is running the way that I want it to run on there. And then I can still scale it to get it to the size that I want those pieces of wood to be on there. I'm going to go with something maybe, maybe something like that. That looks about accurate in scale. And that's one of the things a lot of people have a problem with. They don't make their textures to scale, and that's a huge issue, especially using bitmaps. I see students all the time. They just go download some bitmap and slap it on there and the scale's off. We determine the scale of objects based on the scale of the textures. We have seen woods hundreds and hundreds of times. And so when we look at a piece of wood, and we know the scale of it. So if you have your scale off so that your wood is really big on there, then it makes the hut look really small. So we don't want to do that. Okay, so we've got that on there. So we'll go to the top now. And all I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in here and rotate this, and I'm going to come up here and switch it to world coordinates. And then I want this one on world coordinates so that that's the center. Put an angle snap on. I'm going to hold down my shift key, and I'm just going to, we don't want to be on gizmo. We want to be at the top of the stack because we're copying the whole thing. And I'm going to rotate it to there. I need 7 pieces, 7 more than what I have. And I want them as instances. Okay. Now, the reason I want them as instances now is because then whatever I do to one is going to do to all of them. Okay. So we'll do that. And now you'll see that when I come in here, that the wood is running correctly, the correct direction on all of these. Okay. Now, these are instances, which means that if I decide to come in on one of these gizmos, okay, and rotate it, okay, need to go back to view, then it'll rotate all of them. See that? So, but I've got that the way I want it. That looks pretty good. Scale's looking pretty decent. And we can do a little render in here. Okay, we need coordinates. Oh, that's for that center piece. Okay, what it is let's go ahead and take our center piece in here. And we're going to make a separate shader for that. Okay, oops. That's giving us an error because we have this wood on there. So let's make a separate arch and design for that. This is our concrete hut floor. And we'll put that on that piece. And now we won't get that error message. Matter of fact, right now we can just go ahead and just hide that. And so now we can render that, and we've got some wood floor going in here. Now, this floor is very repetitive right now, and eventually I don't want it to be repetitive, okay, because of, this is the exact same piece here, here, but it's a good start, okay? It's a good start for what we want. Okay, let's go ahead and put our rounded corner in there. It's way too glossy right now. We're going to turn this down. Turn up the quality a little bit here. That's the quality of the specular highlight. Let's go to special effects. We'll turn on our rounded corners, and we'll just do a region render, speed up our process here by doing region renders. By the way, I see students do just the strangest things sometimes. Okay, so when we render that now, you'll see we get the manufactured edge. We're catching a nice highlight on it. So it's looking pretty good. I see students do it all the time. They do the strangest things. So they we're doing a region render, and now they want to render the whole thing. So they'll come in here, and now they'll do, this to render the whole thing. And that's just the weirdest thing, because all you got to do is turn this to view, and then it renders that. So I don't know why, they do that, but they do. Region is, when we want to render a specific region for whatever purposes, we need to re-render something. We adjusted it, or we just want to speed up our process. So that's looking pretty good. Okay, but let's bust this up. Let's take it. So we don't want it so pristine and brand new. We want to bust it up. So what we're going to do is come in here, And let's go turn our region off right now and back to our material editor. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I want there to be some variation in the color of this piece. Okay, so right now it's a little bit saturated for me. So what I'm going to do is to come over here and I'm going to go and get a color correction modifier. Now you can bring the modifier out here and then you can plug this into it, interchain like that. But another thing, just so you're aware, something to speed up your process, if you take it and put it right on top of the red line, it'll drop it in there, and that's a little bit faster. Okay, so this allows me to do some things like I can come in here and desaturate this a little bit. Okay, so could I go into Photoshop? Yes, I could go back into Photoshop and desaturate this, but this allows me to desaturate it on the fly. So now that I'm getting rid of some of that saturation because that's kind of a digital look, it's way too saturated. Okay. Now, another thing I want to do is I actually want to take this color correction node, okay, and we'll just call this one color desat. I want to name things, and I'm going to hold down my shift key and I'm going to copy this now and move it down. Okay. And we're going to call this one dark old. Okay. And so what I'm going to do on this one is I'm going to desaturate a little bit more, and I'm also going to go in here to my brightness and I'm going to darken this a little bit. I don't want to darken it too much, but I just want a little bit darker like that and desaturate it. Okay, because what I'm going to do is blend these together in a kind of organic way. Okay. Now to do that, one of the first things I want to do is I'm going to use a procedural texture to break this up. Okay, to do that, what I'm going to do is put a standard shader. I always use standard shaders when I'm doing some experimentation because they're just faster. So I'll go ahead and pick our object and apply that to it. And what I'm going to do is in the diffuse right now, I'm going to put a procedural texture, and I think the one I'm going to use is smoke. Okay, so I'll double click on it and click this button, show material, and I can see it on there. Okay, now this is the piece that I'm working on right now. The others are mimics of this. I can actually select all of them and put it on there. And now I can see and kind of adjust my scale. My scale is way too small on this. So I'm going to go into my smoke and I want a higher scale. Let's try 10 on that. Maybe even a little bit bigger. Let's go with maybe 15. We'll try something like that. Now, a lot of times you might want to do a little test render because the scales will be off. See how that scale is off? So you have to watch your viewports because they won't be accurate. Okay, so now we're way too big. Let's go back down to say 4 and do a region render on that. See, this is kind of an experimentation process. Oh, maybe just a hair smaller. Let's go with 3. And that looks pretty good. Now, what I'm going to do is use this as a mask so that I'm controlling that one of the parts of this wood is going to show up in one part in the black area and another one of the wood is going to show up in the white area. So I can kind of organically kind of merge these together. Now, another thing that I'm doing here is what's called clamping. By default, this has really soft edges and I want it to have harder edges. So what I'm going to do is come in and grab an output map for this. So go down to my maps and get an output. Now, some procedurals have an output on them. Smoke doesn't. So I put an output in here. And what I mean by that is when you are looking at your smoke, you won't see an output node. But if I was to come in here and say use noise, noise has an output node built into it. But I'm using smoke. It doesn't. So I just add one in. Now, what I'm going to be doing is what we're called clamping in here. So I'm going to take this output and I'm going to open it up here and I'm going to click this where it says enable color map and it's going to make this ramp active now. So I'm going to click right here and add 2 points. I start with them about in the center. It doesn't have to be perfect. Then you're getting your move tool and you want this piece to come straight across and this piece to come straight across right on top of each other. Now, you see how this is mostly black with just a little bit of white? Here's our balance, black and white. So I need less black. So I need to move both of these to the left. And that's adding more white into my pattern. So what this is doing is making my pattern very contrasty. And then I can control, you know, the edge. Okay. So what I'll be able to do now is use this as a mask to be able to come in and mask these two together. So now we'll come back in. Let's select all our pieces again and apply this back to it. But now what we're going to do is unplug this. And what I can do is to come in here, and there's a couple of ways you can do this. We'll do it one way and then we'll do another. We're going to get a mask node. Now a mask node, oops, that's marble, wrong one. Mask node is, I'm sorry, not a mask node, a mix node. Mix has two channels and I mix it with a third one. Okay, so I can plug this in here. When I plug that in, this is going straight through. I've not changed anything, but this is my second color. Okay, so right now what's happening is it's going straight through and we're just getting that original wood on there. Okay, that's been desaturated a little bit. Okay, now if I go back into this and I change this mix amount to 100, then we're putting this piece in there. So we're having the bottom one all the way on there, okay, which is more desaturated and darker. So what I can do now is to unplug this node and take these down here and use this as the mask between these. Okay, so I'm going to actually come in here and drop that in. And now what's going to happen is we're going to create a mask where those two pieces of wood are merging together like so. Okay. So what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to back off of it. Okay. So now I'm going to come in here and start taking this slope. Okay. And softening it a little bit. Okay. Where that transition is between them. So it's kind of like little stains on there. Okay. And another thing I do sometimes is actually come in and want to mix it down a little bit more. But for right now, that's looking pretty decent. Let's do a little bit bigger region so we can just see a little bit more of what's going on with this. And so this is a way to get a little bit of a variation into your pieces. Okay. Now, it's standing out too much. Okay. I want a little bit of variation, but I don't want it to scream at me. And this is one of the things that a lot of problems with a lot of students is they want to scream things at us. I don't want to scream at us. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is to come into this piece right here, and I'm going to back off of the darkness that I put in here. Okay, so let's go to one on there, and maybe not. More subtle in there. Okay, let's look at that. Okay, that's looking a lot better. See how it's much more just some subtle stains in there. Now I'm going to put some other things in here too, but that's what I'm trying to do is to break it up, because since this is patterns repeating with this procedural texture, I can get variation of stains in there and make it become less repetitive in there. Okay, so that's looking pretty decent so far. Okay, now one of the things I want to do now is I'm going to show you how we can actually put some bitmaps on this, and we can vary it even more with some bitmaps. So to do that, what I'm going to do is to come in here, and let's go ahead and save this really quick in case it crashes on us, which, you know, Max is prone to do. Okay, let's turn off our region here. And what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to bake this out. Okay. And I'm going to do a real quick cheap bake. So we're going to go into our render settings here. And we're going to change it to 2048 by 2048 because I'm going to make a 20 by 48 map for this. Okay. And so then we want this to be the largest that it can be inside that 2048 area. Okay, so maybe about there. Okay, make sure it doesn't hit any of the edges. We want a little extra space along the edges. Okay, we're going to do a little test region render on this. Okay, so what we're going to do is let's dump this. Let's do a little region. Okay, see what we got. Okay, that's looking pretty good. And I think what I might want to do is to change my exposure control a little bit. Is the easiest way to do this. There's a lot of ways you can do it. Come in here and add a mental ray exposure control and set this to 0. Okay, then as I kick this down a little bit, it's going to make it brighter. Okay. And I want this a little bit brighter for the next part that I'm going to do. So we'll go with something like that. So now it's ready to render this. And so we're going to render that. And then we're going to take it into Photoshop to manipulate. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and just pause this while it's rendering. And then we'll start back up in Photoshop.